Hello, everybody. Welcome to Shh. We Don't Talk About That here on the PFC Entertainment Network, along with Joanna Barnes. I'm Jason Clouse. We certainly appreciate you tuning in this week. And what we've done here in terms of this episode is we have a saying here that, cards subject to change, because we came into the studios, our respective studios, with one idea that we were going to talk about today. And as luck would have it, we had to call an audible. And so we wanted to get you new content for this week's episode. And we're just going to kind of shift our focus a little bit. Originally, we were going to have, Natalie George was going to be back on the air with us this week. We're going to wait till the next episode. 'Cause that's life, right? Because we can have the best laid plans, like Kristen Watt just talked about this on her show recently. We can have the best laid plans, but, one thing or another, it just kind of puts everything off a step. But being as resourceful as we are, there's always a plan B, C, and D. So with that being said, it's good to see you, dear. How's things going in your neck of the woods?
Oh, it's always an adventure over here. Like you said, we had one plan and then things change. And I was thinking about it, and I always look at it, things like meant to be. So now listeners get an extra podcast because we're still going to podcast next week with Natalie. Yeah. So that'll be in addition. And then we'll go to our 2-week cycle that we're going to go to, because there's content that needs to be written for some of our podcasts that it takes a little time to research and make sure that we have our correct information. And plus Natalie has clients and a super busy life. Me, not so much. I'd have a busy life, but not like she does. So right. It gives her a little bit more wiggle room to be able to fit the time in.
Well, we are certainly most looking forward to getting her back on the air next week. And like you said, the silver lining is your listeners get a bonus episode. So, hey, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because this apparently is resonating with people. The numbers tell me that. And you have been very active on the Facebook page, posting different things, interacting with the listeners. And that's what that whole thing is all about. So right. The pieces are starting to fall into place here for you, which I knew that they would. And and I'm here for it, because this is exactly what this platform is meant for. So with that being said, we are going to, like I said, call an audible of sorts. But before we get into the topic at hand this week, more of a lighthearted thing. Are you guys, you and Keith, are you football fans? Are you paying attention to what's happening?
Keith
with the Detroit Lions?
Enormous football fan. I love Keith. And I do like the Lions. Like, I like the animal of the lion. And so I'm a Lions fan because I grew up in Michigan. I grew up in Tennessee too, so it's kind of weird, but Tennessee doesn't really have a football team that anybody talks about. But pardon me, I'm going to have to clear my throat. I'll probably have to cut that out. But anyway, Keith is a huge, huge football fan. And he's got a tattoo on his arm that is a gigantic lion. And it's beautifully done. I mean, beautifully done. You take a look at it on Saturday. When he got that done, when it was mid being done was when this new coach was hired. And things were like, starting to get better. And when it was mid being done, this lion looked like it was begging the way it was just happened to be done. And I said, that lion is just begging for something to change, something to get better. I said, you watch when that tattoo gets done, for some reason, everything's going to click into place. And that's kind of what happened. I don't attribute the two as actually being connected, but coincidentally, when that tattoo finished is when the Lions kind of swung around and started winning. And then, they had, a better year, and then this year has been phenomenal for them so far. And Keith is just such a huge fan. Unfortunately for me, some kind of trauma is tied to me with football. I don't know what it is. It has to do with the sounds in the background. I can tell that it has to do with the stadium, the sound of it going on, the sound of the sport itself. And it's not just football, it's a lot of sports, but football tends to be one of the more triggering. So I have a hard time watching it. I can have, like, he can have it on, that's fine. I just can't usually be around it, or I'm, you know, in my own thing, like I've got headphones on. I can see it. I can see it going on. That's fine. It doesn't bother me. But I don't know what it is. But when I can hear the whistles and that screaming of the crowd, it gets my anxiety amped up. And I haven't been able to drill down what it is that causes that. But it's just an unfortunate thing. But it is what it is. So.
Well, that's interesting. Now, let me ask you this, kind of a sidebar, and we will get back. We will get to the topic at hand. But this intrigues me. The sounds of it, the crowd noise, that type of thing. So, do you go to concerts or anything like this?
Not usually. And when I do, I take earplugs. If I do go, I have to take Valium before I go in. And I'm high when I go. I guarantee you that I am not sober. I don't drive. My husband is always the one who drives to those events, because he knows that if we want to go, and he doesn't want me to be like, oh, wait, what's happening? You know, and if he comes up behind me or something, which is what'll happen as my anxiety continues to grow. I don't get like that in the beginning, but if I can't be like kind of loose and I wasn't always like this. It just, as I've gotten older, it's definitely gotten worse. Crowds, noises, that kind of stuff. It definitely can be more triggering, but sports events are more triggering than concerts. I will go to a concert. I'm not saying I wouldn't go to a sports event. And coincidentally, I enjoy sports events more when I go to them in person. So it's something about it being on the TV. And I'm sure that it has to do with my childhood, and it has something to do with that. I have some pieces of the puzzle, not enough to put a picture together.
It's very interesting to me, and I can appreciate that. The reason why I asked is because I recorded with Kristen earlier this week, and we had started talking about on air and off air different ideas for different gatherings for the PFC family, and like field trips, if you will.
Right.
And one of the things that I started doing research on was all of us going to a Detroit Tigers game during the summer, because that's my jam.
Right.
I'm a huge baseball fan, love the Detroit Tigers, and I do the Lions too, but there's just something about baseball that is just
we can afford the Pistons right now, though.
Hey, if you want to go to a Pistons game, I'm sure we could get them to pay us to come to them. You know what I'm saying?
I'm just saying, if you want to get a large group of people together.
That's something else. That whole dynamic is something else. I feel like that's something that Keith and I can bond over, is the Detroit sports scene here, in the state of Michigan. So we'll curb that for maybe Saturday.
He played high school football. He's been into football for a very long time, so he really loves it. Really loves the sport.
That's great. And for long-time Lions fans, like, this is what we've been waiting for. So there's so much anticipation, so much hope.
Held on, man. You guys are so deserving of this year, this celebration. Regardless of how much farther anything goes, just that you've gotten to this point is such a celebration. You guys have held out and said, like, they're going to get there, they're going to make it to the playoffs, and everybody has poo-pooed you and told you to shut the fuck up, and you guys are dreamers and, and chasing a dream. And
right. It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Same old Lions, this, that, and the other thing. Yeah. Now what you're seeing are the the bandwagon fans coming out. Oh man, I loved them from day one. No man, go fuck yourself, because you and I had an argument 2 years ago about how bad this team was. Don't be coming back on our bandwagon because we are the cream of the crop right now, as it were, in terms of everybody's paying attention to the Detroit Lions for the right reasons this time. So,
right.
Be that as it may, let's get on topic.
All my regular listeners have tuned out.
Right. Let's bring them back in. Hang on, don't go nowhere.
I promise.
We're going back in.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Everybody who is in Michigan, I think, can appreciate this moment. That the Detroit, I think everybody in the country can appreciate what the Detroit Lions are going through right now, honestly. But I think everybody in Michigan can really appreciate what Lions fans are having a moment.
And that kind of is that transition into what we're going to talk about, because especially here in the state of Michigan, especially this week, we're going to talk about something that a lot of people, especially this time of year, are dealing with. Right. And this is kind of our plan B in terms of a topic for this week. But man, this is something that sparks a lot of conversation. You see a lot of chatter about it here in the last week or so on social media, because it ties in with the weather and it ties in with the overall mood that the winter months bring, especially for us here in the Northeast. Seasonal depression and how people are affected by this. Now, I started talking to you about this off air, and I am one that has never dealt with this. I wish it would be warmer out instead of sub-zero temperatures. I wish we would see the sun more, but it doesn't. I don't think it's affected my mood or things of this nature. And I'll be honest with you, the first time I heard about the term seasonal depression, or however you want to word it, was having a conversation with my brother, just a couple of years before he passed away. And it made sense that he was able to put it into words, because during the winter months, man, he was a bear, and he was not happy. He was very, very depressed. He needed the sun. He needed that vitamin D. He needed that sunshine and rainbows, for the lack of a better term. You get hunkered in during the winter months because you didn't like going outside. We weren't kids anymore, because when we were kids, we would be outside all day, every day, sledding and building snowmen and snowball fights and things of this nature. But as you get into your adult years, well, that's not a priority much as it was when we were kids. This is something that you deal with, I assume.
Well, so I think you're speaking of seasonal affective disorder, and I don't have seasonal affective disorder, but what I do have is complex PTSD and trauma, complex depression, and my complex depression is then affected by the season, and it is affected by there being less sunlight, there being less vitamin D available, there being less ability for me to be able to get out into nature, because for me, nature is a very healing place. So I can exercise for a half an hour or an hour at home and feel like I just don't want to do this. And I can get outside and walk for 3 or 4 hours and have to take breaks because it hurts, but be able to do so much more because I'm in nature. And that's the difference for me. It replenishes and heals me. You can't do that at this time of month. Now, Kristen's husband, Charles, I believe does have seasonal affective disorder. I don't know if he has an official diagnosis, but I know that she's talked a lot openly about how the winter months affect him deeply. And he is not alone. There are many, many, many people that are deeply affected by the seasonal months. The difference with seasonal affective disorder is it is literally the seasons, the fact that the days get shorter, it gets colder, that keeps you from being able to do things, that keeps you from being able to get them function. That's not what's going on for me. I'm going through stuff with my grandkids, going to Arizona for a couple of months. I had just been able to reestablish a relationship with them, which is wonderful. And they've had to go for a family emergency for their dad's side to Arizona for like 2 months, not even 10, 11 days afterwards. And it's kind of an undefined period of time. So I don't have this, like, it'll be 2 weeks, it'll be 4 weeks, they know that they'll be back by March, they think. That's the plan. But who knows what'll happen? This is big stuff that's happening. They're going through the loss of their patriarch. It's a big deal. And then there's estates that'll have to be settled and things like that once all of that is handled, and figuring out the next phases and with Nick's dad, because this is Nick's grandpa, but Nick's dad's life and all of that stuff. And they're a very close family. They call it their village. We're all part of a village, a tribe together. And when the call was sent out, they answered as I expected they would. So they took their dogs and their bikes and their kids and everything. And it feels so like ambiguous. There's no definite definition to it. It's so vague. They could be gone for a couple of weeks. They could be gone for a couple of months. It could end up being longer, depending on what the need is. And what will that mean for the relationship with us, with the grandkids? And that has affected my depression. Is that, and then other stuff. But that's the big catalyst for me.
How old are the grandkids?
The oldest is 12, and then the middle one is 6, and the youngest is 4. So it's still pretty young, formidable ages.
So let me ask you this. Nowadays we have the technology of video calls, right, FaceTime, that type of thing. Can I assume that that's something that gets utilized in terms of trying to keep contact with them? And does that help you navigate through missing them and all of the emotions? Because I can only imagine, you reestablish that connection, you reestablish that relationship, and like things are going good, and then they're called off to the other side of the country. And I can only imagine what that does to you psychologically. But knowing that you have these tools for communication that we did not have at our disposal at that age, does that help you?
Well, so far we have not used video calls. They have only been gone since maybe a week or so. And that's including driving time and everything. And then there's the big problem that I have to consider is they're going through the death of a family member, and there's a 3-hour time difference. And the kids are all in homeschool as well. So trying to find time when all the stars align, when the kids are fed, they're like trying to find that perfect moment is not as easy as one might think it might be. So I'm sure we will do video calls. Will they be able to be something that's regular? Regular meaning like I'm sure I could get one once a week. I'm sure I could arrange something like that, and hope that will. That way, if we miss a week, at least it's only been like 2 weeks or something like that. Because there's going to come up times where something's going to happen and she's going to have to cancel, and we may not be able to reschedule. Just with podcasts, and it's just the nature of just when you have technology, just because it's there, just because it's there doesn't mean that your whole life stops enough for you to be able to use it.
It's very true.
With him taking care of his dad and his grandpa, and, I'm talking about her husband, and her taking care of her husband and herself. I mean, they're taking care of each other, out there. I think that it's a little selfish for me this early to be like, hey, what about the video calls? Can the grandkids call me? Can we do that? Is that going to happen? It's like when? Can we do that? Like right now? So I gotta chill out a little bit on that. And people who are not on YouTube will not be able to see what I just did there, but that's your own loss. I don't know what to tell you.
For real. Go over to the PFC Entertainment Network YouTube channel to see the full experience, because I mean it tickled me. I don't mind telling you, because it's an illustration of a very real emotion.
Sure.
And like I'm
that's
not
what's going on inside.
Right. I'm not making light of it. It was just the way it came.
And that's what I think listeners need to hear, that too, is that I can have both things can be true, right? I can feel that and not act on it. Right. One of the best things that my therapist taught me was that thoughts are not threats, feelings are not facts, and sensations are not mandates to act. And sensations mean feelings as well. So just because you feel something doesn't mean you got to act on it.
Right.
Just because you feel something doesn't mean it's a fact. Doesn't mean it's true. Just because you think somebody thinks something doesn't mean it's true. You know, it's a whole thing. So go ahead.
No, I was just, when you start talking, because I know you well enough to know at this point, how important that connection to your kids, your grandkids are. And I'm certainly not peeling the curtain back here. That's not for me. But this is a time where you and your husband have been waiting for to get things back on track here. And it's kind of ironic that as you guys are reestablishing that bond or mending those fences, or however it is you want to word it, the other side of the coin, the other side of the family is dealing with a pretty significant circumstance that, has called them away. So, I guess more than anything, it's my attempt to make sure that you're good. You know what I mean? But this is why we do the podcast, because this gives you the platform to get those feelings out in a productive way. And not only that, there are other people that are listening to this or watching this that either have or are going through something very similar. That's the premise of the whole show here. Right. To share your experiences, because knowing that you're not alone in any struggle or situation is such an important thing in terms of either finding the answer or dealing with what you're dealing with, so you don't get thrown too far off the rails. Would you say that's accurate?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because prior to having this estrangement reconciled, my husband and I were very starkly aware of how little family we have that engages in our lives. That our family that we have are our chosen family. They are the family that we have built through our friends. You, Kristen, Angela, the people that in our lives that we know that we could call at any time in the morning, day, night, whatever, and be like, this is, car's broken on the side of the road. Can you come get us? Those are the people that we had, the relationships we, for the most part, have had to cultivate, especially myself, outside of our family unit. My husband has a much different family dynamic than I do, so I can't speak for his family. He's close to his mom. He and his brothers have a decent relationship, but they don't, they don't get together and hang out and stuff the same way. But he could call them for anything. I can't. I do not have that. I don't have that relationship with my parents or any siblings, and cousins I have a lot of them. I couldn't honestly tell you what any of them think anything positive of me. If they do, that's not true. There's two that I do think I probably have a decent relationship with, but for the most part, a lot of it is built on stories and assumptions of, things that have been passed through the family, and then nobody talks to me. And so instead, there's just been, like this podcast, people get upset. They think that I'm going to talk about the dirty laundry instead of just saying, like, we just don't have a good relationship. And so that's led to Christmas. We had nowhere, we didn't go anywhere Christmas Eve. We didn't go anywhere Christmas Day. We kind of just stayed. I think we ended up going into Springfield Inn, I think, on Christmas Day for dinner so that we didn't have to eat frozen dinners or anything. And that was not, a lot of that was because my husband had been sick and he was just getting over illness, and we weren't going to go expose, like we had friends that invited us over, but we weren't going to go expose all of them. But previous to that, we would have had family stuff that was arranged. I mean, it ended up kind of being a blessing he got sick, because we didn't have to resent missing out on anything because we couldn't go anywhere, but we were so aware through the holidays of how alone we were if we didn't work to cultivate and work on the family relationships that we have, and then repairing this relationship with our daughter. We have our son, we have a great relationship with him. He has autism, so he lives with us. And he is a wonderful man, a wonderful young man, but he's not somebody that is going to come hang out with us while we're having Thanksgiving dinner. He's going to be up in his room eating a pizza, so, and that's something I had to come to accept a long time ago, that's just what he needs to do he'll come down and hang out with us for a little bit, but like he doesn't enjoy any of the Thanksgiving foods. They make him feel nauseous. He'll hang out with us for a little bit, and then he goes upstairs and he hangs out and he eats his pizza. So if we do a Thanksgiving dinner where I want him to be involved, we're eating burgers. You know what I mean? We don't do traditional Thanksgiving or Christmas meals, actually, because I want him involved. And so we make whatever anybody wants. We do smorgasbord nights. What does everybody want? And then we try and, that's what we do. And then we do try and do a traditional, because my daughter and I love the traditional turkey. Keith loves it. So we'll try and make those nights, but we just don't have to have them on the holiday. If we want to spend the holiday together, we don't make it about the food. We make it about each other.
This is going to take this conversation off to a sidebar, but it kind of ties into something that I talked about on the flagship show this past week, because I got into the family dynamic, and what that looks like, and the different variables that go into play here. And there's just so many aspects to the family dynamic that is brought to the light that people talk about, but there's other aspects of it that don't get talked about. And in turn, it creates causes some degree of dissension within the ranks. And you said something very, very important, and it kind of ties into one of the points that I made on that episode is the word family doesn't and isn't necessarily regulated by who you're related to by blood.
Sure.
You said that, your extended family are your friends, Angela and Kristen and, those kind of people. They're, you're not bound with them by blood. You know what I mean? You're not actually related, but this is the family that you chose. And sure. I can appreciate that on so many levels, especially at this stage of my life, because like with the wrestling company, I looked at that roster as my extended family because I spent so much time with them. I put so much effort into them. Now, that's why the PFC network is so important, because I took what I learned, the good and the bad, from my time in the MWO to bring that here. What worked, what didn't. So like this coming weekend, as we're recording this, I'm throwing you guys a party. Because I want all of the podcast hosts to feel like they're a part of a family dynamic, because the family dynamic is so damn important to me. I grew up in a family of four, my mom and dad, me and my brother. Well, now it's just me and my dad. So I have such a better appreciation for the dynamic of family. and what you just laid out here in terms of your son, and the fact of what you will do, you will take your traditional dinners and things of this nature and put them on the side for a different day so that you can incorporate your son into the holiday or the moment or the event or what have you. Mm-hmm. And that speaks volumes of you and Keith as parents, as people. You know, you really, you have your finger on the pulse of what's important. And I feel like your upbringing that you have been very open and honest about to this point on the air played a hand in that. Like, you also have a better appreciation of what the family dynamic is because of your experiences growing up yourself. And I needed to take a minute and acknowledge that, because I don't know if you get enough praise for that. I don't even know if you need the praise. You don't need the praise, because outside your family, it doesn't make a fuck all what anybody else thinks, says, or does. This is how you guys conduct yourself with your family. This is what you do for your children. And I every week that we do this, like, I come into this thing and I have a baseline amount of respect for the Barnes family. But every single time we do this and we sit down and we're talking on the air, there is something that you say or something that gets brought to the light that I'm like, I find myself having to sit back and be like, damn, these people got it going on. And it makes me appreciate and respect the both of you that much more. And I just needed to acknowledge that.
Well, thank you. My imposter syndrome wants me to tell you that you're wrong, because you just don't know me well enough. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say thank you and say that, a lot of what I do and learned early on was, I remember thinking, like, I don't know how to be a parent. I don't know how to raise these children. I'll just do the opposite of what I learned, and I'll love them. And I'll just do my best to let them know that I love them. And hopefully everything will work out along the way. And I don't know if you can see my stack of books back here, but that's just a little bit of some of my stuff. And I've got my DBT one as well. That's just a little bit of some of the stuff that I've read for therapy. When I was with my kids, I read all of the, what to expect when expecting. Like, I try and educate myself as best as I can. However I'm able to, whether that's go to school or just go to the library and check out a book. But when it comes to family, one of the things that I learned, well, there's two things that I learned. One is, like you said, you don't have to be blood. And one of the things that kind of made me click with that was, I feel more connected to my husband, Keith, as my family than I do most of the people that I do share blood with. So just, if I can do that, then what is the difference between me choosing? I mean, there's just a piece of paper that legally makes us related, right? We chose each other.
Right.
We had chosen that long before we got married. So what is the difference between me doing that and deciding that Kristen is my family, or Angela is my family, or Natalie is my family, or, my bestie Jen from high school is my family? There's nothing. I've got to find a charger. I was ill prepared. Oh, there it is. Hang on, Jason.
Perfectly fine. And you're absolutely right. You don't have to. We get to choose our extended families. When we look at that, and like, I can appreciate that, because by and large, we don't choose people to be a part of the quote-unquote family dynamic that we feel like is going to be a detriment to our well-being, either physically, mentally, emotionally. So this is something that Sean Grugel and I talk about a lot, because, being in the wrestling business, the word family gets thrown out very, very frequently. But as soon as you no longer serve a purpose for somebody else, they will excommunicate you. I mean, within a heartbeat, So
Sounds like family to me.
I mean, for real though. So at this stage, and we really saw it when we got out of the wrestling business. It's like, okay, I had a roster of 40 at one time. You know how many people I correspond with on a regular basis after I closed the wrestling company? Maybe a handful. Right. I mean, and that's a damning statistic unto itself, but it also tells me my definition of the word family and their definition of the word family do not coincide. There is no meaning in the middle because I put different priorities on that word, I guess. And I feel like that might be an individualized thing, right?
Well, yeah, and I was going to make a second point that my other point with that was that I realized that my family is my support system. So I need to make sure that I am supporting my family, but also that I'm letting them know what I need from them so that they can be supportive of me. Otherwise, because it's not their job to guess what I need. But what was your question? Ask me your question again, because I have an answer for
it. I forgot how I worded it because I was so dialed in.
That's okay.
What I was saying. How the hell did I word it? I wish I had instant replay on this. But I guess my point is,
you were talking about getting thrown away, basically. Like, you have 40 people that you communicate with, and then you have this roster of 40 people, and now you communicate with a handful of people.
We have different definitions of what the word family is.
Correct.
And it's like, okay, I'm choosing like you guys in the PFC network now. And because by and large, I do not pick people that I feel like are going to be a detriment to my well-being. But there are going to be times where that hasn't happened here, thank God. But like in the wrestling business, those people came to me, they were part of my family, but as soon as you no longer serve a purpose for them, you are no longer a priority to them. And they will essentially, for the lack of a better term, turn their back on you or stab you in the back on their way out. And that happens in real life, blood related families as well. So I feel like, having a family dynamic of people that you choose, such as what we're doing here, and your circle of friends, your support staff, or your support group, that is such a crucial thing that people take for granted a lot of times. Have you experienced this? I mean, you just got done saying a lot of your blood relatives you don't have a whole lot of a connection to, for the lack of a better term, much like you do with...
Not for lack of trying.
Okay.
Just put that out there. Not for lack of trying. I did try for a long time, and then I quit. Because I refused to chase people. That's it.
And that's where I am right now. I ain't begging nobody for nothing. I am getting out of a situation where I've had to beg for time and attention and affection. Why in the fuck am I supposed to? Why am I supposed to beg for this?
You're not.
If I'm supposed to be as important to you as you are to me, I should not have to beg you for your time. I shouldn't have to listen to a barrage of excuses as to why you don't have time for me. And it's not like I require a lot of time. Just acknowledge me every once in a while. You know what I'm saying?
I know.
That's, I guess that's my own triggers.
Yeah. But and the thing with family, though, is if we don't cultivate that support system, whether you label it family or you label it your friends group or however you label it, I label mine family. That's my family. And they are the people that I mean, look, you say ride or die. I am not a ride or die. I have questions. I have many questions. I am not ride or die. There are many questions along the way that I want to know. Why do we have to ride? Why do we have to die? Okay, are there snacks? Is there anywhere that we can stop to pee? Like, can I take a nap? I'm not a ride or die, but I am there for you if you are in trouble. If you are having an issue, if you are having a problem and I can help you, then I will do my best to help you while still respecting my own boundaries. Because that's one of the things that people have a real hard time separating is sometimes you have to say no to something that you would normally do or you would love to be able to do, or maybe you're even capable of doing, but it's just not within your energy levels, or it's not within, you've got too much that's grinding on you right now. You've got too much going on. You're just not feeling that you're not able to add that onto your plate. And you have to say no. So something like that is setting a boundary where you're protecting yourself, but you're still you're honoring yourself. That's really, really hard to do when you have depression. It's really hard to do when you have trauma. It's really hard to not do the fawning, trying to get everybody to like you, the codependency thing. And that comes especially when you choose people that are family. Like, it's one thing when people are related to you because there's this unspoken, like, you have to like me, you have to love me, right? We're related. So there's this, like, you have to love me kind of thing. But
Right.
when you choose family, like you said, there are a lot of people that once you are no longer of some kind of vested interest to them, you are no longer family. You are no longer of worth, and they are able to toss you aside. That's not the same. That's always true of your sibling or your cousin or your parent or whatever. I think that it really depends on what your experiences are growing up, what kind of experiences you've had through your relationships, and then what kind of healing you've done, and what kind of self-worth you have. If somebody's been able to help you instill some good self-esteem, some good self-values, some self-worth, so that taking care of yourself doesn't feel wrong, then it's a little easier to navigate some of these issues. But if you have self-esteem issues, depression is really easy to fall back into pretty quick. Because it feels like everything you do is wrong.
Yeah.
And you're always wrong, and you're always the mistake, and you're always the problem. And, it takes a lot of work to, like, retrain your brain to not think that way. So,
Now, kind of tying back into what our original topic here was supposed to be, do you feel like with the added emotions that go into this time of year with people that are dealing with their adverse effects or their adverse reactions to winter months and the lack of sunshine, the lack of light in the day? The days are shorter, the days are colder, everything that we laid out here. Do you feel like during this time of year, any and all ill feelings with the family dynamic are amplified this time of year because of the underlying, or the not the underlying, because it's not underlined, but the backdrop of the winter months, and, for the lack of a better term, the seasonal depression that comes into play here?
I mean, if you're affected by it, then sure, I would say that it's probably going to be amplified. I think if you are affected by seasonal affective disorder, if the seasons, if the shortness of the days, if you're not getting enough vitamin D, and an oral replacement isn't enough to supplement what you're not getting from going out in the sun, because we don't absorb enough out in the sun unless you live like out in Florida and you're out there all out in the sun all day. Typically, us out in Michigan, like, we don't absorb enough. We typically need, most Michiganders could use an oral supplement of vitamin D. So it's not uncommon for people to be vitamin D deficient. And that's one of those things that goes with depression. Like, that's one of those things that it could help if people added this in, but it's not a cure. it's just one extra thing. And it's one of the things my doctor and I talked about, like you know, your counseling helps 10%, your medications help 10%, your journaling helps 10%, your meditation helps 10%. You add all that in together, that's 40%. That's, I mean, it's a huge, when you're taking each down, you're not supposed to compound percentages that way, but for demonstrative purposes, it is kind of what they're trying to get us to understand, is that it's taking away 10% each time. So yes, if this heals 10% of this and this heals 10% of that, and you can add them on cumulatively, then it does heal 40% of what you're going through. Well, that's huge. That's almost half. You know, just by applying some techniques, and some of that is bigger, like medication and counseling. Those would be bigger than 10%. Actually, you'd probably get like 30% from your counseling and 30% from your medication, and then like 10% from your journaling and 10% from your meditation and 10% from your yoga. It'd be something like that, so that it's more like 80% if you do all those things regularly. And that's what I found, that I'm in depression right now because I have not held myself accountable. That is the problem that is going on right now, Jason. Above and beyond anything else. There are triggers, environmental triggers that have happened, but I knew when they were happening, I knew what the tools were, and I knew what I could do to help me get out of them. However, sometimes the depression gets to be too big, and it is easier to sit by the fire with your cat who's dying from cancer than it is to hold yourself accountable and get up and do yoga and meditate and do journaling. Even though I'll feel so much better if I do all of those things, and I know it, it's hard to hold yourself accountable for it.
Are you one of these people that you just laid a scenario out where it's easier to sit by the fire with your cat and things of this nature, but you know that if you did this, if you did that, if you did the other thing, that it would be extremely beneficial for you? Are you one that, if you were able to get up off the couch and take step one, just one step, that it will motivate you to start tackling the other boxes on that proverbial list?
So yes, ish. I have EDS. It's called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. That's something that I've talked about. I've got like real stretchy skin, and that's why I look young, and that's why my tattoos look so beautiful, and they're kind of old. They're getting kind of old now, and a lot of it has to do with I have connective tissue disorder, and so I get up, I get the motivation to say do my yoga, and then I'm feeling good, and then I get it from there. I'll go and I'll do the dishes, and then I might get myself something to eat, or take care of the cat, or do something. And by that third thing, whatever it is, my back pain has started to kick in now, and there's nothing to do but to give it a little rest. I've tried all kinds of different things. There's nothing to do. I have a procedure that's scheduled for the 19th, and that's to ablate the nerve, kind of burn the nerve off. Hopefully that'll help. But I just have a lot of health issue things. So I can go for, half an hour or so, and then the pain will really start to get overwhelming in some area, or I'll twist my ankle. That happens a lot. The ankle just decides to go on a journey that I did not approve. So I am standing there trying to get something done, like literally just standing, and my ankle's like, hey, I want to go over here, and tries to flip out, and then I've got to go sit and ice my ankle for the rest of the day. I don't sprain and stuff like I used to because I'm too stretchy now, but it's a complicated body to have. And a lot of that comes from, I've talked about this before, your genetics. They talk about it like, I heard it on the Adult Chair podcast, and I wish I could remember the man who said it, but your genetics are the gun, and your environmental experiences are the trigger. So the genetic code might be underlying, but you may never come up with rheumatic arthritis or Ehlers-Danlos syndrome or heart disease or, something like that. But if you have something like adverse childhood experiences, like I did, that leads you to be more prone to depression. It's called ACE, and they called ACEs. It's called Adverse Childhood Experiences Score. I'll do a whole podcast on it, but they have found that these adverse childhood experiences are directly tied to people like me who have multiple health issues that are documented. Like, hey, we can find that you have sphincter of Oddi dysfunction, and we had to go in and we had to put a stent in your pancreas 5 times, and we don't know why. But it's because genetically I had that predisposition. Nobody else in my family has that. But environmentally, I had been put under such stress that trauma kind of pulled the trigger for me. Right? And that's just one of multiple conditions that I've dealt with. I've had 2 cervical fusions. I've had shoulder surgery. I'm having this ablation. I've had like 20 abdominal surgeries. And I had a hysterectomy by the time I was 25. 26, because it was a week before my 27th birthday. All of these things, I may have been prone to them, but it's probably not likely that I would have experienced all of them had I not had all the adverse childhood experiences that I had, and then the compounded trauma later that kept my body just in a constant state of elevated cortisol and elevated adrenaline, and it's just so bad for your body. And then on top of that, I had this depression that unlocked at a young age. I think I talked about that on another podcast that I remember it. I can remember that stepdad telling me that I was stupid and I was a loser and I should have never been born, and my brain was the size of a pea, and it was daily. And I remember one day just thinking, man, if somebody just tells you this enough, I mean, it's got to be true, right? Especially because he's an adult. So, he's got to know more than I do. And nobody is stopping it. I keep asking for help, and I had tried to call CPS, and I had been told to stop making prank calls. I had tried to call the police, and I had been basically told the same thing. There was nowhere that I could go to get help in my circle. It just couldn't happen. That led to me having complex depression, complex PTSD, and then being affected by the seasons. And the holidays are awful. The holidays, I'm better at the holidays because my daughter's birthday is December 23rd. So I can make the whole month of December kind of a celebration of when I became a mom and my life kind of started changing for the better. Because that, for me, is my turning point. And I've talked a lot about my daughter saved my life. And it's unfortunate that I gave a baby a job before she was even born, but I did. And it was that she was going to keep me alive. She was going to give me somebody to love who wouldn't leave me. Shocker. Spoiler alert. But anyway, she was going to give me she was going to be somebody, and she didn't leave me. She took a breath. She took space. She didn't leave me. My daughter loves me. And I've known that all along. Never doubted it. But I gave her a job when she was born, and that made it very difficult for her. Because I was not in a healthy place to have children at 18 years old, having gone through all that trauma. I just wasn't. I wasn't in a good place. But I did it so that I would have something to live for. And I'm not alone. I know a lot of people who've gone through trauma who had kids so they'd have something to live for. And they just, we lived for our kids.
Not the first time I've heard that. I have other people, I have other friends guys too.
Yeah.
That, they were on a path that was leading them right to self-destruction.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they found out that they were going to become a father, everything changed. Their whole perception, their whole
absolutely
purpose changed. So
to be clear, I didn't deliberately get pregnant. I just didn't try not to get pregnant. I was not careful.
Well, listen, the universe has a way of making things happen when either we least expect it, or when we don't. I mean, we may not realize it at the time, but we can look back and be like, man, if that hadn't happened, or if this particular instance hadn't happened, there's no telling where the fuck I would be at right now.
Oh, that's true.
I mean, there's one way of looking at it. So I feel like and I have not lived your life. I'm just going on what I do know based on what you have talked about here. In a lot of aspects, having your daughter when you did is kind of what saved different aspects of your life. Would you
she
say
saved my life? She did. And I've told her that. I just don't know that it was fair to her. But those are two separate things. And I can't go back and change the past. And I don't regret her being born 1 second. I am so thankful that my daughter was born. And I'm so thankful that I was given the daughter that I was, because she makes me grow, and she makes me stop and not just get into those ingrained patterns of bad behavior from my mother, where I have to actually stop and learn how to be better. And she doesn't do it by being a shitty person. She just sets her boundaries and is like, this is what I need. And I have to step up to the plate or not. And I love her enough that I am always going to step up to the plate.
Has your daughter ever expressed to you that she felt like she was the word here? Did she feel like she had a job before she was born?
I don't think she ever expressed that, but I think that she definitely exemplified, just in her behaviors, how much I relied on her by the way she got termed Mama Sage by her friends at a young age. And she took care of everybody because she was my little diaper fetcher and my bottle fetcher. And I would joke about, I don't know how I raised her without another one to fetch for me, because that's what this one is for. Every time he has a dirty diaper or something, she can go fetch for me, or, and it wasn't like I would joke about it. It wasn't like that, but she did help me a lot. And I thought at the time that I was including her and therefore would keep her from getting jealous, which it did in a lot of ways, but it also made her feel like she had responsibility for him that wasn't hers to worry about. And then it ended up making her feel like she had, I think she definitely felt like she had more responsibility than she should have had to deal with as she was growing up, especially because I worked midnights, and that made it really hard. And I would stay up and make sure that the kids were, like, they would go off to school, and then I would stay up and clean or do whatever, and then I would try and get a couple hours sleep and then get up and then have dinner, cook dinner for them, have dinner with them. And then for a while I had to use my mama's daycare, unfortunately. So I would have to drive them I lived in Rochester, and I would drive them from there to Oxford. I'd put them to bed. Then we'd go from there. I'd drive back to Rochester. I'd work in Rochester. We lived in Shelby Township. So we go from Shelby Township to Oxford to Rochester and then back again. And I did that for quite a while. And then I met Keith. I remember being so grateful they didn't have to go over to my mother's anymore. And after about 6 months of us dating or so, he started taking over and watching the kids. And that really helped with that aspect. But because Keith was 23 and had never had any kids and didn't have that, like, this is how you be a dad, kind of gumption and knowledge and stuff. I mean, he was 23. And I came in like, I was so afraid that he was going to hurt my kids in some ways because I had been hurt by stepdads, that I put that filter on it and was like, I can't let him have I can't trust him. I can't let him have any space or anything. So I didn't allow him any real room or space to grow or discipline my kids. Even when I knew I had to have that control, Jason, because And I didn't know this back then. But if I controlled everything, then I could make sure that nothing would go wrong. And if nothing went wrong, then I couldn't upset anybody. If I didn't upset anybody, they couldn't get mad at me. If they didn't get mad at me, I couldn't get in trouble. I couldn't get hurt. It was like this whole thing in my head that was constantly going. So I always had to keep the plates going constantly. And I mean, it's no wonder I ended up with so many health issues, you know, but I worked midnights. I went to college. I was taking care of the kids. And I was also taking care of the whole household and basically like letting Keith support me, but not, and be a buddy to them, but not be a dad to them, and not let him fail, not let him like make mistakes, because they were just being, I didn't have a great relationship with my ex-husband, and they were going through enough. So I was like, well, I just refused to let anything happen. I wouldn't even give a chance. And I wish that I would have given him the grace to fail, because he's such a sweet guy. I mean, he would have never hurt my kids, you know, but back then I had experienced it so many times that it wasn't just stepdads, it was males that came into the purview of my life. And it wasn't just through my mom, it was through other areas too. So I just kept getting this message of it wasn't safe around young kids, you know, and that unless there was a woman around, you had to control the situation.
You have 2 kids.
I do.
Keith is not the biological father to them?
No.
I did not know that.
No. It's Keith is my second husband. So I was married at 18 and then divorced at 25. 25-ish, 26, 25, I think. Because I talked to you about I had a hysterectomy at 26, almost 27. And that was about a year afterwards. And then I met Keith in 2003. And my kids were like 5 and 10. Keith's 5 years younger than I am. I don't know if you know that, but
I did not.
Yeah, I'm 5 years. I'm the cougar in this relationship. Well, he's 5 years younger than I am. 9 months of the year. For 3 months, we are 4 years apart. And I just revel in that 3 months. I'm like, I'm only 4 years older, just so you know. I'm only 4 years older, just so you know.
Right.
So, but yeah, so when Keith came into the picture, my kids were 5 and 10. And Tyler doesn't have as much memory of my ex-husband, but my daughter had a relationship with him. It was a rocky one for a long time. She has a good relationship with him now. And I think that that's great. I don't want to have any relationship with him. I still have trauma from him that is still buried in my body that I have not dealt with. At some point, I will deal with it. I've just been dealing with each one, you know, as they come along or as I need to deal with them. But I have not delved into my relationship with him. And at some point I will, and maybe he'll want to have a conversation and repair things, or maybe he won't. I don't know. We'll see. If we could get to some point where we could have a cordial relationship and be able to have family functions for our children, I would do that. But I need to be able to make sure that I'm still respecting my boundaries. So, and it's hard to do that when you struggle with depression.
But as the things are right now, you know, I'm talking about your ex-husband here. Yeah. He has contact. He has some sort of a relationship with your daughter.
Yes.
Okay. And your son, not so much.
No.
Just trying to get everything in. Like I didn't know that. So I'm learning things as I go here, and I'm trying to put things into something of a timeline.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you why he doesn't have a relationship with my son. You would have to ask him and my son that. So.
I mean, this could splinter into its own conversation, its own podcast episode. So we'll table that for another time. But you know, it's just one more thing, another aspect of the amount of growing respect that I have for Keith, and because I know, I have not been in his situation, but I have. I kind of have been in different aspects. So, and I can understand the sensitivity of coming into a dynamic like that and trying to be respectful of boundaries and, stay in your own lane, this type of thing. So for him to be able to, navigate through that in the way that he has, and, to be able to establish himself as a safe place for your kids, or they know with him, like, there's no bullshit, like, this is what you see is what you get with him. And like, my dealings with Keith have been few, but I pick up on people's auras, I pick up on people's vibes. I've never gotten a bad vibe from him. I've never, like, he just seems like a very genuine individual, and like, I got all the time in the world for people like that. Now, if something wrong,
he's fake. It's all bullshit. Don't believe it. He's a liar.
See, that's how rumor and innuendo gets started. Because some asshole is going to pull that video clip or that soundbite out, like, Joanna Bartz hates her husband. That's how that shit happens. That's clickbait, Joanna. That's exactly how that happens.
Clickbait is how my podcast goes viral, Jason. That's exactly how that happens.
Right. Joanna hates her husband. Joanna versus Keith, the main event.
Oh my God.
Oh, man.
Oh, no.
Listen, I know we started the conversation. We were going to talk about one thing, but we have been all over the board here.
We did. We just encompassed a few things in there.
Yeah.
But I will say that as far as Keith and me hating my husband, Keith and I almost never fight. We argue. We disagree. But I think I could count on my hand the number of fights we've had where it's been like one of us shouting at the other.
Pretty remarkable.
It's unproductive. So it's what I've found is that if he shouts at me, I shut down. If I shout at him, he shuts down or punches something. It's nothing works. So yeah, we figured that out pretty early. I mean, honestly though, he and I probably were together 2 years before we even had a disagreement, because really? we just get along so well. But he's so easygoing. That has a lot to do with it. He's just so easygoing. It's not me. It's him. He just fucking gives in all the time. And I'm like, sweet, I was right. I knew it.
I feel like I'm going to have him on the flagship show so he and I can have man talk about this. I feel like.
you should do that. I told him I want to have him on the podcast. There's a specific topic that I want to talk about with him. And I want to have him on for at least 2 podcasts. One of them I'm not going to tell what the topic is, but the other one I want to have him on to have a spouse talk about what it's like to go through their partner going through this kind of healing, and what you need to bring to the table, and what he had to go through, and what benefit there was for him going through it. If any, maybe I'll hear that it was all a fucking shit show and he really wishes I hadn't done it. I don't know. But
that's something that he would be interested in doing. Has he expressed interest on?
Yeah, I've talked to him about it. Yeah, I've talked to him about it. So he's definitely interested in that one. And then the other one, I'll talk to you about once we end recording. But the other one I think it would be an awesome podcast. It might end up being like you might end up liking the topic enough that you want to branch it off into its own podcast.
Oh, damn. Okay.
Yeah.
Listen, I have hours in the day that are not accounted for. So we
Keith
need to start a new
funny.
show.
I don't know if you know that. Keith is very, very funny. I surround myself with very funny people. I myself am slightly humorous, but I surround myself with really fucking funny people. And I do that for a reason, so that I can appear funnier. It's working. Keith is really funny, but he's quiet. So, nobody ever knows. I mean, sometime I'll tell the story of how we met. I picked him up.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you are playing the role of the cougar.
Yeah, kinda. There's a story to it. But
I love a good story.
yeah,
You know,
it's a cute story. Our relationship. My new
well,
tattoo is itching.
listen, I'm actually getting some ink done at the beginning of March, and that is the one thing that I don't look forward to is that itching stage because you just want to scratch the shit out of it.
Are you going to
Uh,
Hype Tattoo?
I actually the majority of my work has been done at Studio 42 up in Flushing. I have a buddy of mine that owns that shop up there. Actually, I met him through Sean Grugel. He used to own Who's Your Donnie Tattoo in Fenton, and then he moved up to Flushing and opened up a new studio, and that's where I get the majority of my work done. You know, it's a trust factor, right? And he's never steered. No, I didn't say. I'm not saying that. I mean, look, see again, rumor and innuendo. I can see, you know, the work that's been done on you, and it's very good. So maybe I will explore other options. Are they busy? I mean, do you have to book shit like 8, 9, 10 months out?
Depends on who you're trying to get into. So the guy that I just got in with, Nate, he is just coming out of his apprenticeship, which you would not believe that, considering that this is the work that he just did for me. He's really easy to get into. His fiance, Pinky, is the one who, she's been tattooing for ages. She's the one who did his apprenticeship. She's not hard to get into. You just, you know, you got to book it out. Like, February right now is booking up for her.
Okay.
So, Hannah, the owner, I usually have to book a couple of months in advance with her if I want to get work done with her. Now, Hannah's the one that did Keith's Lion. Wait till you see Keith's Lion on Saturday.
Okay.
And then, but usually I have to book a couple of months with her. And I'm just ragging on you, man. Like, go to who you love. You know, there's great artists out there everywhere, but I love Hype Tattoo because they have so many artists that are really phenomenal artists. And so I can usually get in and see somebody, and most of their artists will do lifetime touch-ups for me. So if I go in there, like Hannah does lifetime touch-ups on all her shit. So if there's ever anything that goes wrong with it, you just go in and you're like, and she's like, okay, I'll touch that up for you. And she takes care of it. I mean, she's got to agree with you that it needs it, but, you know,
sure.
You can't just go in there and be like, hi, can you just... There has to be something there, but... And she's got 2 locations, one in Farmington, one in Flint, and I used to do her Chamber of Commerce events for the Farmington location. So that's kind of why I have so much ink. A lot of this ink was done in the last 5 years. I didn't have all this shit for a long time. So I didn't have pink and purple hair. I had long blonde hair.
You as a blonde, I can't imagine it.
Yeah.
I just, interesting. Okay. I dig it. You know, you're reinventing yourself, you know?
Yeah.
So I can appreciate that. You know, I'm very selective about, you know, what I do to myself in terms of my physical appearance or
right.
presentation. I found what works for me now, and this is just kind of what I stuck with. But I mean, you start talking about tattoos, you know, that shit's permanent. And,
exactly.
And it's very personal. So
yep.
I know what I want.
Yep.
It's just a matter of getting the time and the money. Well, you know, kind of peeling the curtain back, like my profit sharing check is coming here in a couple of weeks. And this is the first year that my profit sharing check is not already accounted for, as it has been for the last however many it had been spent before I got it by other influences. But this year I'm taking some of it, and I am going to do shit for myself because I have worked my ass off to get that profit sharing check. I'm going to spoil myself a little bit. And part of that is getting right here on my forearm, I'm having Pure Fury with my brother's dates on her.
Oh, okay.
And that was his wrestling nickname, and that's why this network is the Pure Fury Creations Entertainment Network. It's my tribute to him. So I'm having his nickname in New Orleans Saint colors because he was a big New Orleans Saints fan with his dates on there.
Okay.
So that's what I'm doing.
That'll be a big deal.
Yeah. I always told myself I would never get tattoos on my arms, you know, in case I had to get a new job or something like that. Because
never say never, man.
No, well, I started with that one, and like all my shit is kind of themed with skeletons and bones and things of this nature, and this will be no exception. So, yeah, it's just a matter of pulling the proverbial trigger on it because I'm so scared about spending money on shit, but I've earned it.
That's right. That's right. And if you're going to spend something on it, you should spend something on like tattoos that last for the rest of your life, because you blow that same kind of money on dumber shit that ends up breaking or losing it or shitting it out or whatever. And
oh, true story.
Oh.
Like I know we've been all over the board here this week. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you wanted to put out there in terms of our initial topic that we have not touched on yet?
Well, I think that it's important if you notice that you have changes in your mood that are based on the seasons, specifically the winter months, that you should speak with your doctor about seasonal affective disorder, because it may not be just classic depression. It may be something that's a little bit different, and it's treatable. I think that if you are struggling with depression, the best thing that you can do, besides holding yourself accountable in some way, and I am doing it, like I did yoga today, I did the podcast, I did my hair, I did my makeup. Those are things that hold me accountable, self-care. So if you are struggling with depression and you can't get up off the couch, like just plan one thing to do that day that you can do. And it doesn't have to be anything big. You can just plan that you're going to comb your hair. And that's all you have to do that day. And you can literally say, okay, I'm not ready to comb my hair, but I'm going to stand up. And then you stand up. And then the next thing is, okay, all I have to do is walk to the bathroom. You don't have to think about anything beyond that. All you got to do is walk to the bathroom. Like if you're this far, if you are into depression where you're struggling, and I do have days like this, where I'm like, all I got to do is just walk to the bathroom. And I get into the bathroom, I'm like, well, I'm here. I might as well brush my teeth. And then I brush my teeth. And one thing, like you said, one thing will lead to another often, and then it'll start snowballing. And then before you know it, you've brushed your teeth and combed your hair and maybe taken a shower or gotten dressed or eaten something or whatever. But just try not to just indulge in just sitting on the couch. Try to do at least one thing and make sure that that one thing isn't just eating.
Good point. Good point.
Right? Eating that's to exist. That should be a given. You should be eating no matter what. But in addition to that, you should try and do one thing. Just one thing. So, and I think we can leave it with that.
All right. Well, listen, I know we were up and down the roller coaster this week in terms of different feelings and emotions and things of this nature, but I felt like this was a very good conversation. We talked about serious shit, but we were able to make, a couple of ha-has along the way, and that's what you come to expect here with this show, because life can be serious. It can be overly serious if we allow it to, but there's always an aspect about life that if we're actually being honest and kind of sit back and be like, that's pretty funny. And I'm going to make, either you make light of it or you incorporate it or something to lighten the mood, or at bare minimum, if you get kind of a chuckle out of it, well, that's your bright light of the day. Because that one moment wasn't all all bad or all negative or this. If you can find one thing out of your day that just brings a smile to your face or it warms your heart a little bit, hey, that's what it's all about.
Not to extend this, but I think even beyond that, earlier today I dropped a bottle of oil, like a glass bottle, so glass shattered, olive oil everywhere. My old me would have gotten very upset. I would have been very distraught. I would have probably cried. I did get upset, but I instead chose to sing motherfucker several different ways as I cleaned it up. And I ended up enjoying myself kind of at the end. Like, I was like, motherfucker, 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 motherfucker. And you just, like, I don't know what my neighbors thought. I don't care. My walls are paper thin, and I'm on the HOA board. So it'll be interesting to see what the next annual meeting is like. But that's how like, it's not just about that day, man. If you have a bad moment, but you can find one shining spot in it, and if you can't find one, fucking make one.
I love that. I absolutely do. And that, I feel like I'm going to incorporate that later today. I know I'm going to come across something, and the word motherfucker is going to come into my mind, and I'm going to think about you singing that. I might actually pull that out and make it an audio clip and download it to my phone just for that moment, just so I don't lose my shit. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. My bestie from high school pulled the soundbite from the first or second, no, with Natalie, where I was like, "This shit about to blow up." That's their soundbite that they keep playing over and over. I was like, "Oh, okay, that's what you like. That's what you like."
Trendsetter. That's what I said. You're a trendsetter. That's how gifts became a thing. You know, they took a.
Yeah, it's not. I'm not just showcasing the rack.
Again, if you're not watching this on YouTube, you're fucking missing out. So go ahead.
That's usually true for me. You can't see me live. You're missing out.
Hey, true story. And I will be seeing you live this Saturday coming up. Well, as this show drops, it will have happened last night. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to getting together with all of our PFC podcast family. I'm
looking forward to being distracted from my dad's birthday.
Yeah, I thought about that too.
It's your job.
You mentioned that, and I have it's in here, and I am going to react accordingly on that day. All right.
Rick will be watching.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna, there will be a show on display for sure.
All right.
With that, we appreciate everybody tuning in this week. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, show topic ideas, or anything that she or I or Natalie can help you with, head on over to the Facebook page. Just look for Shh, We Don't Talk About That. Or you can send us an email to the clousetotheheart@gmail.com if you wanted a more discreet way of communication, and we will make sure that we handle your request or your correspondence accordingly and appropriately. So with that, go out this week, be awesome to yourselves and to each other, and we'll see you next time right here on Shh, We Don't Talk About That here on the PFC Entertainment Network.